Call the March 17th, 2015 meeting of the Zoning Board of Appeals for the City of Troy to order. And I would like to call upon Mr. Evans to call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Clark.
Here.
Mr. Courtney. Mr. Desmond.
Here.
Mr. Eisenbacher.
Here.
Mr. Neal.
Here.
Mr. Kaltsunas.
Here.
Mr. Sanzico.
Here.
We have a quorum for this evening, and so we can proceed with business. Before we proceed with the agenda, we're going to just introduce everybody up here at the head table for those who are watching at home or those who are in the audience tonight. So I'm going to start by introducing to my far left Mr. Kaltsunas, who is a member of the board as an alternate, and he will be seated here tonight as a full voting member of this board. To his right is Mr. Eisenbacher, who is the vice chairman of this board. And this is Mr. Sanzica, who is a planning liaison from the Planning Commission, but he's a full member of this board as well as per the decision of the City Council. I'm Glenn Clark. I'm the chairman of the board. This is Mr. Desmond, who is a recent addition to our board, and we want to welcome him once again. To his right is Mr. Neal, who's the former chairman and now a member of the board. And then over here on the side is Mr. Evans, who is the city management liaison to this board. And to his right is Ms. Dufresne, who is an assistant city attorney for the city of Troy, and she will serve as our legal advisor here tonight. And I do want to mention that the minutes, excuse me, not the minutes, but the agenda is at the door. So if somebody forgot to grab one or wants to see that, please feel free to get up and take advantage of that. So now we're going to move on to item 2, which is approval of the minutes. And before I do that, I forgot to call Mr. Eisenbacher. He's going to read our procedures that the board has set to govern our meeting here tonight, and he's going to share it with the public.
Okay. The Zoning Board of Appeals is a group of 7 of your neighbors appointed by the City Council to decide on requests for variances and other matters that are brought before them. A variance is the relaxation of the literal provisions of the zoning ordinance. Petitioners must indicate a hardship or practical difficulty with the land that would warrant the granting of the variance. The procedure. The board will hear the items in the order they appear on the agenda. When an item is called, the chairman will verify that the petitioner is present. Then the city administration will summarize the facts of the case. The petitioner will then be given an opportunity to address the board to explain the justification for the action requested. After the petitioner makes their presentation answers any questions that the board may have, the chairman will open the public hearing. Any person wishing to speak on the request should raise their hand and, when recognized by the chairman, come to the podium and sign in on the sheet provided. The speaker should then identify themselves with name and address, indicate their relationship to the property in question, for example, next door neighbor or live behind the property, etc., and state whether they are in favor of or against the variance request and give the reasons for their opinion. Comments must be directed through the chairman. Comments should be kept as brief as possible and closely pertain to the matter under consideration. Only one person will be recognized by the chairman to speak at one time. At the conclusion of the public comments, the chairman will close the public hearing. Once the public hearing is closed, no other public comment will be taken unless in response to a specific question by a member of the board. The board will then make a motion to approve, deny, or postpone the request. In order for the request to pass, a minimum of 4 votes is needed. If the request is not granted, the applicant has the right to appeal the board's decision to the Oakland County Circuit Court.
Thank you, Vice Chairman Eisenbacher. Now we can proceed with item number 2, which is approval of the minutes from the previous meeting in February. Is there a motion, or are there any questions from a board member? Yes.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
It's been moved by Mr. Sanzica for approval of the minutes as presented. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Desmond seconds. Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, Mr. Evans, I believe we're prepared to vote.
Mr. Desmond.
Yes.
Mr. Eisenbacher.
Yes.
Mr. Neal.
Yes.
Mr. Kaltsunas.
Yes.
Mr. Sanzica.
Yes.
Mr. Clark.
Yes. Motion passes. Now we move on to the item number 3, which is essentially the printed agenda. And this is for board members to bring up anything that may have been excluded or wanting to make an addition to it. Are there any comments by board members? Or Mr. Evans? Hearing none, we can move on to item number 4. And this is a postponed item from the previous meeting. And before we move on to having Mr. Evans present to the board, which is the tradition, I'll just say that to the petitioner, that you have an ability to request of the board another postponement since we don't have all 7 board members here tonight. We can take action, we do have quorum, but it's a courtesy that the board extends an offer to the petitioner to make that request. You don't have a right to a postponement, you have a right to make the request of a postponement. So we'll wait for you to address that issue if you care to when you're called before the board in a few minutes. So at this point in time, we are going to deal with item A, which is the variance request related to David J. Pardun, related to 1321 Boyd Street. Mr. Evans, could you please present to the board?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to direct everybody's attention to the monitors to the left and right and behind the board. My first slide is an aerial of the neighborhood. This neighborhood is located east of Rochester Road and north of East Big Beaver. In the upper right-hand corner of the slide, you'll see the property circled and outlined in red. I've zoomed in closer on the property itself on Boyd Street. It's on the north side. It's outlined here in red on the property. Now, all the surrounding property and the subject property is zoned single-family residential, and all the property, with the exception of the school district property to the north and to the west, is used as single-family residential. Now, as the chairman indicated, this matter was heard at the February meeting and tabled to this meeting. The nature of this request involves to split the existing property into 2 equal-sized properties, basically right down the middle. So this third slide we have is a survey of the property. Boyd Street is at the bottom, and the black line you see running up and down in the is the proposed line of split. Now, the zoning ordinance requires that newly created parcels in this zoning district be at least 7,500 square feet. Now, the subject property, both properties actually, as proposed, will be 305.5 feet less than that. So that's the variance they're requesting here tonight. The applicant has provided 2 elevations, one or both of which he proposes to build if he's granted this variance. And one note I'd like to repeat from that I advised on the February meeting is that if the variance is granted, the driveway laws for the city would require that the new driveway for the westernmost parcel be located as far east as practical on the property. So I've tried to illustrate that here in this survey with the area in the yellow, that's where the city engineer would want to see a new driveway if this variance was granted. Now, there's a few questions we had from board members, one at the February meeting and one after the February meeting I'd like to share with everybody. At the February meeting, Vice Chair Eisenbacher asked if the existing lots on the street that are undersized, and there are many of them that are undersized compared to today's zoning ordinance requirements, if they were compliant when platted. So I pulled the subdivision plat, and that dates back to 1926. Most of the lots, well over 90% of the lots, were undersized compared with today's requirement. Now, all the lots within the original plat were compliant with whatever codes the city had in effect, and I'm virtually 100% confident that we did not have any zoning codes in effect back in 1926. The overheads now are just a close above the original plat. More than 90% of the lots in the original plat had the identical measurements as what the applicant is requesting here tonight. Now, the second thing I wanted to report is that Board Member Desmond asked me after the meeting about when the minimum lot size of this subdivision was changed to 7,500 square feet. Well, what I can tell you is that anecdotally, the city planning department, it's our belief that the 7,500 minimum square foot lot area for this subdivision has been in existence at least since the 1960s. By way of example, in my research, I located a zoning ordinance from 1964 that said in the R1E zoning, which this property is, and the whole subdivision, that was the requirement to have 7,500 square feet. Unfortunately, I couldn't find a zoning map to confirm 100% that that was the zoning of this property. I did find a zoning ordinance and a zoning map as far back as 1979 confirming R1E zoning, 7,500 square foot minimum. So that answers that question as to when possibly this requirement went into effect. And then the final comment I'd like to make is in your packet, there's a comment from someone named Gary Mayer. Gary Mayer is our police chief, and he actually responded in that capacity, but it's just not clear on the email that he is the chief. So with that, I'll turn it back over to the board for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. I'm glad you survived all that dust from 1926 and the 60s as well, all the paperwork you had to go through. Sounds like there was quite a bit of research on your part. Thank you for giving that information to the board members as requested. Are there any questions of Mr. Evans or comments on what he's presented from board members? Hearing none, I believe we can proceed with the petitioner. And if the petitioner wants to come forward, please, obviously, for the record, identify yourself and your relationship with the property for the record and for the public. Good evening.
David J. Pardon, and owner of the property. Did they have the package, the new stuff that I gave them?
Yes, in their packet is all the additional information that you provided.
Because I was asked in the last meeting what our hardship was, and I thought it was, I thought it was kind of a no-brainer, but the lot that's there now that's existing is twice the size of anybody else's lot that's there, which kind of poses a problem with building. Well, not building, but keeping with the aesthetics of the subdivision. If you see sheet one that I gave them, I thought you were going to put it on the screen, but that's sheet one is if we don't get the
Mr. Pardon, I'm so sorry to interrupt, but are we establishing that you're prepared to go forward this evening?
yes, for
Okay.
sure, yes.
Okay, I just want the record to reflect.
sorry,
that.
I should-
Okay,
okay.
thank you.
Yeah, no, I'm prepared. We have a building envelope. If it's not, a variance is not granted, we have a building envelope of 6,300 square feet, which is 105 feet by 60 foot deep on that site. I'm trying to keep with the aesthetics of the subdivision to bring things in, which, yeah, this is the sheet. The next sheet would be, if we were to get the variance, we would bring these building envelopes back down to realistic sizes, which are 60 by 45, which would accommodate houses that are more like the houses that are in the subdivisions now, which are, 15 to 1,600 square footers. I guess they vary from 800 square feet to 3,500 square feet. I'm trying to stay away from building a 3,500 square foot house to build two smaller homes to fit in with the neighborhood. And then there's a sheet that it shows, I mirrored an image of two ranches mirrored in. That's, mirrored in, this is what something would look like from the street. And then I posted another one that shows the bigger home, which would show, that would probably be something that you would build if we didn't get the variance, which would kind of dwarf the homes that the neighbors are kind of, worried about happening. I went out and spoke with the neighbors, after our last meeting, and I listed them on. You've got his sheets of the comments that they had, and I tried to answer what what their concerns were. There was one, Beth Martin. She got with me before I turned in the paperwork to you guys, and she had no problem with what we were doing. She said she'd rather see two smaller homes than one big home there. You saw that. And I guess there was another concern that came in today from Susan Reisner. They've seen a lot of changes in the last 24 years there. I'm trying to keep it down to where we're trying to keep with what's in the area now. It's build big or build two small ones. It's kind of the same to me. But like I said, I'm trying to keep in with the neighborhood and. But I think that's about it. I mean, everything else I think is self-explanatory, what I put in the letter, and like I said, I hope you agree with me.
Thank you. If you could just stand by it for 1 second, we'll see
Okay.
if there's any member or members who'd like to ask you a question. Mr. Neal?
I do have one question for you, sir, just so I understand. Why would you have to build a home as large as the 3,500 version?
To accommodate the size of the lot. I mean, their lots are, it's twice the size of everything that's there. I guess you could put a small house on there, but it wouldn't be feasible to put on, which is kind of, and all I'm asking to do is to put it back the way it was. Somebody combined the lots earlier, I guess, to one lot for some reason, and we're just trying to fill it in the right way, I guess.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any other members for the petitioner? Hearing none, you can, I'm sorry, Mr.
I do have
Eisenbacher.
one. Your last statement brings up a point. We have 5 criteria as a board that we go through, A, B, C, D, and E. D states that the characteristics that make compliance with dimensional requirements difficult must not have been created by a current or previous owner. Unfortunately, what you just said is that obviously one of the previous owners combined the lots.
From what I understand, yeah.
That would tend to indicate to me that the characteristic that you're asking for the deviation from was created by one of the previous owners. And I'd just like to basically point that out, because if it wasn't done by the city or it wasn't done by an outside force, that limits our ability to act on this item per our criteria.
Okay. Like I said, it's...
Okay.
Okay, anyone else? Seeing none, you can have a seat, please, sir. Thank you. And I'm going to call on Vice Chairman Eisenbacher before we do the public hearing to give us an accounting of the transmissions of support in opposition to this request.
Okay. Gone through them all. We have 2 emails from 1308 Boyd, one with questions and then one expressing the concern, and that's diagonal and across the street from the property, and it was against. Then we have an email communication from Tommy Desmond, which that I could not see an address on, but apparently he received one of the postcards from the city. And then we have one from 1264 Boyd, a handwritten note in opposition. And again, two email, a
Mr.
handwritten letter.
Eisenbacher, could you just speak into the microphone, please? Thank you.
And then a handwritten letter and an email in opposition from I'm sorry, I got these confused. We have a letter from 1265 Boyd and an email from 1465 Boyd. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5,
Were
5 letters of opposition,
Were those last several in favor or in opposition?
all in opposition.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you. And just a question for Mr. Desmond, was that your letter?
No, that was an email that I sent to Paul.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Requesting clarification
Gotcha.
on when this was put into effect.
Very good. Okay.
Sorry, I didn't
That's all right.
connect.
Okay, and at this point in time, we want to call the public hearing open for the general public to make comments to the board about their thoughts on this petitioner's application to this board. So if you'd like to address the board, please come forward. You'll simply have to identify yourself for the record. And I see people in the chamber, but they're not coming forward, so I will close the public hearing if no one is, okay. Please come forward. And I'll take the opportunity to wish everybody in the chamber happy St. Patrick's Day.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Mary
I'm going
Calderon.
to pull that down just a little bit. Very good. Excellent. Good evening.
My name is Mary Calderon, and I live right next door to 1321, 1333. And besides the, I don't know what you would say, there's always a lot of disruption, you know, when you have building and everything. But I just, what I was against was I didn't really care for a very large home. And also, from the first descriptions of the building, it was too close to my property, about 5 feet or so. So that was my objection.
Okay.
And that's it. I just want to say that.
Thank you. Anyone have a question for this speaker? Seeing none, thank you very much. If there's anyone else who'd like to address, please come forward.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. If you could identify yourself and then make sure you sign in
I will.
afterwards.
Okay. My name is Diana Lottie, and I'm here with my husband Fred. We live at 1308 Boyd, and I have sent you 2 of the letters that you have in your package. And we are definitely not in favor of granting a variance to split a conforming lot into 2 non-conforming lots, as we've previously stated. And really feel it would change the essential character of this section of Boyd, whether it's 2 houses or a big house, which I can't see anybody purchasing on our street of little homes and small ranches there, but who knows? I guess they could. But we feel there's still a public safety issue there, as I stated before as well. What I didn't say before is that in that section of Boyd, there is very little street parking. I don't know how familiar you are with Boyd, but our side of the south side of Boyd, there is no parking at all, ever. The north side, there's limited parking because of the school, and you can't park between 7:30 and, 2:30 p.m. on the north side. And if this property was split and another driveway goes there, that eliminates more parking there. So we've got, for the most part, single driveway homes, and there's need to park on the street. So we've just feel that that's going to make a bad situation worse. And I don't think it's in the best interest of the neighborhood of affordable homes, and I think that the homes that would be replacing the house that is there now would be taking an affordable home away from someone. And not everybody can afford homes in this day in the price range that the petitioner is considering building. And it's a good neighborhood, a neighborly neighborhood, and everybody tries to work together there and look out for each other and that, and we'd like to see it stay that way, basically. So, and I thank you for your time. I appreciate
Sure. I
that.
just have a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
So if the board denies the request for the 2, the gentleman certainly has the right to build according to the ordinance.
Yes,
The
a larger
size
home.
maximum, and, we all have a right to our opinion, but, I mean, hopefully you understand that he
could.
has a right to his opinion in that regard, too.
I do understand that he has the right to do that. I don't see anybody buying a home of that
Yeah.
size on our street of small homes. That's what I see. I just don't see that happening. So, and though you...
And that's, of course, for him to
That's
take
right.
the risk
I understand that. I
moving
understand
forward
that. Mm-hmm.
if he chooses to, yeah.
And I have talked to some of the neighbors, and unfortunately, they haven't sent you notices probably. I don't know if they don't know how to do it or what, but I haven't spoken to anyone on our street that's in favor of it, to be honest with you. So, and I don't know if you can take that into consideration or not, but I just wanted to make that statement. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
How many neighbors did you speak to who weren't in communication with us? 'Cause you heard who was
Well,
already,
I couldn't
or who
hear
were.
what you were saying from back there, but my next-door neighbor and my neighbor directly across the street.
Okay.
They are not, definitely not in favor, so,
Thank you very much.
okay.
Anyone else who'd like to address the board, please come forward.
Hi, my name is Ann Schoenbeck. I live at 1393 Boyd, so I live about 4 houses down from the proposed houses. My concern, as it was before in February, is the congestion that we have at that location with the street coming out from both schools and all the cars and kids that walk in that area. I think it causes a lot of congestion, a lot of kids that are walking. It's kind of detriment to their lives sometimes because, first of all, the street is not as wide as a normal street would be because two cars cannot get down it. So to me, to build two houses there is just going to put more congestion. It's going to put two more driveways, two more cars parking all over that is going to inhibit the flow of traffic in that area. I don't have a problem with people building houses they have on our block in compliance, but I do have a problem with things being built unnecessarily. There's one house on there now, you know, granted, it's not the greatest house in the world, but people live in there. And I also feel that some of the people that are living in that area have been approached and not very nicely to say that, you know, if you don't let us build these little two houses, that we're going to put some big, huge house up and you're not going to like that either. And that's been said to a few people in the neighborhood that have been approached about the houses being built in the area. So the fact that I feel that they're threatening people around that if you don't do this, then this is what we're going to do is just unnecessary. Again, I've talked to our neighbors that are down further in the block about it, and they're all opposed to it too. And a lot of it has to do with, like I said before, I come down my street and that traffic's coming out of that school, those schools, and I can't even tell you how many times I've been hit. The Aladdis don't even have to set their alarm at 7:45 because I'm honking my horn because I'm trying to go to work. So every time I come down there, I have to honk my horn because nobody pays attention to the fact that there's a street there. I've tried to get a stop sign there, but evidently that's not feasible for some reason or other. But I just feel that it's a lot more congestion that needs to be put in that area and blocking the street of cars coming out. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Okay.
Is there anyone else who would like to address the board on the public? Okay. I thought that may be the case, but I thought maybe you just did it really quick and ran away. So I don't see any other, we'll get to you, sir, in just a second. I will close the public hearing out on this matter right now.
Mr. Chairman, wait, before you get the gavel, I just want to, for the record, note that Sergeant Szyminski is here from the police department. He is not going to take an official position on the granting or denial of the variance, but because there have been public safety issues raised both last month and this month, if the board had any questions for Sergeant Szyminski, who's very familiar with the issues on Boyd Street, he's happy to answer any questions related to the facts of what's happened on that street.
Very, very good. And I don't believe we have to have that as part of the public hearing. We can call upon him as a,
If you had questions.
yeah, for sure, from, you know, city staff and the city police department. But we would certainly appreciate it if the sergeant had any comments, or if the board members have any questions of him, we'll call him forward at this time. Mr. Vice Chairman Eisenbacher, would you like to say something?
Yes, I'd like to ask a question about the stop sign, because I've
Sure.
driven through that area many times because it's relatively close to my house.
Good evening, Sergeant.
Good evening, Board.
Thank you for coming. We appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Why is there not a stop sign on the exit driveway from Baker onto Boyd?
That has been considered. There have been studies done both by the city traffic engineer and by an independent traffic agency, and they've come to the conclusion that it's not warranted. I can't give you the specific reasons why, but I do know that it's been studied and been reviewed and been considered, but it's been rejected in favor of the yield sign.
Yep, thank you. Oh, okay, there is a yield sign then present.
There is a.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Okay, so there is a traffic control device, it's just
Correct.
not a stop sign. Okay.
Anyone else for the sergeant? Seeing none, do you have anything else further you'd like to share?
No, I'll stay here in case there are any further questions. I'll be happy to answer them.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
At this point in time, I'm going to close the public hearing out, and bring this matter back to the board. I did see the petitioner motion that I think he'd like to address something that may have been said during the public comment. I believe that that's appropriate at this time. If you have a short comment, yes.
I didn't threaten anybody, anything. I just asked, I said, look, if we do 2 lots, we're going to build 2 smaller homes. If we don't get the 2 lots, we're going to build 1 bigger home. So it's whichever they prefer. I was just letting them know what would happen if the variance wasn't granted and how, what we're going to do. We're going to develop the land either way. We came to the board and took 60 days of our time off of this thing to try to stay with the neighborhood, the way they are, to try to blend in with them. But like I said, I never threatened anybody. I simply asked and went to each person and asked them what they thought.
Sure. Any comments or questions by the board members of the petitioner? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
So now I'll open up for board members to either make a motion or to inquire of the city administration or make a comment. Mr. Sanzica.
Mr. Chairman, I just like to discuss the issue about the characteristics which make compliance with the dimensional requirements difficult, must not have been created by the current or previous owner. Another way to interpret it is that this was platted this way. It was done originally at 7,200 square feet versus the 7,500 feet. It may have been combined at a later date, but the issue of the noncompliance was done when it was originally platted, and the subsequent zoning did change following that. So I don't believe it was the existing owner or the previous owner that had caused this difficulty. So I don't take exception to what you said, but it may be another way to interpret what the requirement is. And also, the proposed variance, in my opinion, would not be harmful or alter the essential characteristic of the area in which a property is located. I think there are homes, there are a variety of sizes of homes in the area. There may be another home that will be added. There may be another trip. There may be a few extra trips generated from this home, but substantially the traffic for this area is encountered from the entire street rather than one more home. I think would be nominal on what the additional traffic would be. So, in my mind, I would have a hard time not approving the proposed variance.
Thank you. Are there any other comments or motion? Mr. Neal.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question for staff.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Evans, for reference, I'd direct you towards sheet 11 of the package, which is a tax parcel map. I know it's lots 28, 29, and there's a Sidwell number or parcel number that's diagonally shown. The question I have is, I can see that this is tracked under one parcel number. However, legally, does the meets and bounds description for this parcel, does it identify it as lots 28 and 29? Is it actually combined, or is it just sole ownership under one parcel number? The question I have is, is it really a combined parcel, or is it 2 parcels that are owned that are adjacent? I know there's a reference in the zoning code that if you have 2 parcels owned side by side, that for our purposes we treat them as one parcel, but you know what I'm asking? I'm asking, is this truly one parcel, or we have an individual owns essentially 2 lots that are adjacent?
Well, I can tell you that from an assessment standpoint, the fact that it has one tax parcel number is going to indicate that the legal description, I don't have it here in front of me, but it's going to include lots 28 and 29 of the name of the subdivision. So it's going to have one legal description, one tax parcel number, and the zoning ordinance would view the boundaries based on that legal description as the outer boundaries of lot 28 and 29 without the common property line between them.
Okay, so as a follow-up to that, is there anything in the record that shows that there was a legal effort or an actual true effort by a previous owner to combine the parcels, or has it always been a situation where somebody owned two parcels, 2 lots, city lots in here, side by side?
Well, I didn't research the parcel combination history to determine if it was perhaps due to a zoning change, if it was the assessor that did it. I can tell you that the house was built in 1946, and the house does straddle the common property line, but beyond that, I'm not prepared to offer any more information.
Understand. I do have one more question, but
Yes.
it would be for the city attorney.
Sure.
The question I would have is, since this was plotted in 29 or 26, I forget the exact.
26.
26. And has been indicated, it was originally set up as a 7,200 square foot, essentially a 7,200 square foot lot. And I know our zoning policies going back to the 60s, from what you had said earlier in the meeting, Mr. Evans, was we wanted to work with 7,500 citywide. Sorry. Is there anything in the way of information of a grandfathered clause or consideration factor that we should be aware of where you have a non-conforming lot, a whole subdivision, frankly, that was established, of course, before the code, but at some point in the future, for example, other redevelopment may occur in here, and it would seem to me you'd have the same problem. You know, you'd say you owned it, you bought lot, let's say you bought lot 30 and you decided to tear down, and then you wanted to build a new home on it. Technically, you couldn't unless you came before us for a variance. That's my understanding. So I'm asking you, is my supposition logical? Does that make sense?
I think I understand your question.
Yeah.
The issue that this board faces is you need to make the determination based on the zoning standards that are in place today. I'm not aware of any grandfathering clause that would apply. The scenario that you bring up is interesting, and I don't know how we would solve that. But in terms of this application and this set of circumstances, you need to assess based on what the zoning requires today.
Okay. Can I ask a hypothetical? Like I said, maybe I can't really use the information because I know we're tightly constrained by the zoning code, but let's say I'm going to use a different lot number. I bought lot number 100. I don't even know if there's one here, but let's say I bought lot 100. And I do want to tear down the house. And I want to build a new house. And I'm going to not need any zoning variances as far as set-asides or anything. I just want to build a new home. As I understand it with the zoning code in effect, I would have to come before the zoning board and ask for a variance, for which my colleagues or other people who are on the zoning board could deny me the right to build a home on a parcel that I bought. So with that being said, I guess my question would be, is because if someone is unhappy, they have the right to go to Oakland County Court with a decision rendered by the board, wouldn't I have a pretty good case as a landowner to make an argument? I guess it's an opinion.
Before I try to answer that question, Mr. Evans has found something in the...
Okay.
Yeah, there's a couple sections in the ordinance that talk
I
about...
apologize for this, but there's a practical
No, this is a good
aspect
question.
on how we...
The first thing I'd like to frame is the property at 1321, even though it consists of 2 lots, it's viewed as one piece of property.
Okay.
And because the property size complies with the current zoning ordinance, it's not a grandfathered lot in that regard. Only because of the variance request are we talking undersized lots. Now, related to your question is that because we do have properties right across the street that are undersized, if someone owns a lot that's undersized, they can put a single-family residence on it without a variance, provided they meet setbacks, lot area, all the other things that regulate that. Now, what the ordinance goes on to say, though, that if someone owns 2 contiguous lots, say they're 2 separately addressed properties with 2 separate tax parcels, the zoning ordinance would require that those 2 or more properties be reconfigured to create lot sizes in conformance with today's standards.
Okay, thank you. that makes a lot of sense, and my scenario was really an apples and oranges thing, because what you just said answers, they would, if I had lot 100, to make sure I understand, and sorry for the long-windedness, is that I would be able to build a new home, provided I didn't need any other variances.
Right.
But if I owned 2 lots, I'd have to comply with the current zoning code, which was adopted, or at least the zoning code required in 7500, which was sometime in the 60s. I would have to meet those requirements.
Yeah, and it's today's, right, right.
All right, okay, well, that's logical and reasonable.
Sounds like you've got a good understanding.
All right, thank you very much. That's all I had, Mr. Chairman.
Do any other board members have comments or questions? Yes, Mr. Eisenbacher.
That made me think, your question. So is that more applicable, like, say you had 3 lots, you wanted, and it's easier, it'd be easy to combine them into 2 and need no variance, like in this case?
Right, that's one theory that would work. If you had 3 contiguous lots, you could create 2 separate zoning parcels and put up 2 homes.
Okay. And then it would be in full conformance then?
Right, right.
And just slightly above the 7,500 average?
Yeah, but if you owned 3 at the same time, and they were 3 individual tax parcels, 3 individual lots like we have in this neighborhood, we would require some kind of combination, something, if you wanted to,
Okay.
yeah.
Mr. Sanzica.
I apologize if I'm asking the same question over again, but please forgive me. But let's ask, for example, if you have a 7,200 square foot lot, one of the existing lots, and the house that was on that lot had burned down, and the owner wanted to rebuild the lot, would he have to ask for a variance?
No.
Or to build
No.
the home? And why is that?
We have a specific section in the ordinance that allows a single-family home to be built on a non-conforming lot, provided they meet setbacks, height, square footage, coverage.
So if it wasn't the same owner, he would be allowed to rebuild his home on that lot?
Right, without a variance.
Without a variance? Yeah. Thank you.
I have a
It
question.
sounds like that's the only grandfather clause related to the situation, kind of to Mr. Neal's point, but not
It's not
apples
really,
to
it's not
apples.
really a grandfather, but it becomes as a non-conforming lot of record.
Yeah,
So it's
sure.
not really a grandfathered, it just becomes,
Yeah,
because
good
it
way of
doesn't.
putting it, for sure. Thank you. Was there someone over here?
Yeah, I have a
Oh, I'm sorry,
question.
Mr. President.
Under Section E of the Statement of Practical Difficulty, the proposed variance will not be harmful or alter the essential character of the area in which the property is located. Now, does that work in reverse as a hardship if the variance is not granted and one large home is placed into this sub that's clearly platted, you know, to be the type of neighborhood it is? I mean, that would alter the essential character of the neighborhood if it was not granted. Does that not constitute a hardship?
Well, I mean, that's up for each board member to determine if there's a practical difficulty individually, but also the board as a whole to determine how applicable that might be. What I can say is that anyone would have the right to demolish the existing home on this property and build a home that goes right up to the maximums allowed by the zoning ordinance. There's no requirement that they do that, but they could do that.
Okay, thank you.
And are there any other comments, questions, or motions to be made by a member? I know some people want to go home for St. Patrick's Day, or perhaps out for St. Patrick's Day. We do have this item in front of us. Are there any other questions of the city staff for clarification purposes?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Neal.
I'd like to make a motion to deny the petition, and it'd be based on the fact that a hardship has not been identified, and that the characteristics or the requirements of the zoning code really require that that the property be developed as one complete parcel of land, and it does not meet the practical difficulties as identified in A, B, C, D, or E of our zoning code.
Thank you, Mr. Neal. Is there a second to his motion? Any other board member would like to second that? I'll second it for discussion purposes. So we have a proper motion in front of the board now, and the Neal motion is for denial based on his comments. Are there any other comments from board members? Vice Chairman Eisenbacher.
I can see where A applies in our statement of practical difficulty on page 2, because it was originally platted as 7,200 square foot properties on average in that neighborhood. And I can see where B applies because it's this property, it's not somewhere else. I can see where C applies and I can see where E applies, and E is the one where I have the most difficulty with, because just across the street and down a little ways on the same small property, there was a tear down and a rebuild, and the replacement house is very nice. It is a two-story where most of the houses to the east are ranch style, but there are a few houses to the west that are two-story colonials. So I don't see E as being a negative either. The only hang-up I had was D, and one of our other board members pointed out a solution for item D. I'm somewhat curious of our attorney's interpretation of how we should be taking item D, where the characteristics that make compliance with the dimensional requirements difficult must not have been created by a current or a previous owner. The land was platted as 7,200s. We don't know how big or at what point in time it was combined, or by whom. So.
Mr. Frame.
Yep, I can't tell you how, I mean, I can't really tell you how to interpret something because these are sort of individual assessments that you're supposed to make. I think if we had that information as to how these two lots became one, that might be helpful for us. Was that information available or not? You couldn't find it in your research?
I didn't research it. We could do a title search and see what we come up with.
But I would remind the board, you don't, your guide is to find as many A through E as possible. You don't necessarily have to find all 5. You have to find as many as practical. Again, I can't tell you how to interpret that because it's your own individual assessment based on the facts that have been presented by the applicant.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Neal.
I'd have a comment that I would add, if I could. Before I do that, I want to make sure, as I was not at the last meeting, I want to make sure I'm not missing something, and I would ask staff the following question. I guess this would be for you, Mr. Evans. Is when I go to the rear of the package and I get to page 54, 52 through 57, these are records that go back to previous discussions in this area in July and August of 2004. These are requests to subdivide or to allow something very similar, which if I look through these were denied. Is that correct?
Right.
How did they get into our packet? I'm just curious. I'm using them as part reference.
Anytime there's a variance history on a property,
Yeah.
I try to get at least the minutes in your packet.
Okay. Well, I very much agree and can understand where Vice Chairman Eisenbacher, his thoughts and opinions. And originally when I went through that kind of protracted exercise where you referenced some parts of the zoning code, and the city attorney also provided some assistance. I was looking for a way to how to make this work procedurally and allow it. But the information you gave me left me with the conclusion there is not a procedural way to approve it because of the way the code is written and how it's been developed to deal with non-conforming lots, which is essentially what we have here for these small lots going forward from a zoning code that's now changed to square footage. And then I also take into account what we've done as a board over the last 10, 11 years, and I don't know what we might have done in the past, but in being fair and in taking into account those previous decisions, that is where I came up with the conclusion and therefore the motion to deny. And I must say, I'm in part hamstrung because of the way the code is written, and then second, taking into account what we have done in the past. So I'm very sympathetic to Mr. Eisenbacher's comments, and I do believe also that the developer could build 2 homes here, and they would look fine in the neighborhood. I agree, but I can't get beyond the 7,500 in my mind, and I may be wrong. I would love it if you guys could explain to me where I'm missing it, but I can't understand how we can approve the 7,500 to 7,200 foot square footage variance without a real hardship being developed, which I still don't see other than a want. And that's just my comment. But, that's just my thoughts. I'm on the fence here. I'd like to help the applicant. I also understand the residents who surround the property, their desire not to see a change, and I want to be respectful to them. But altogether, I can't really seem to come down in a manner to try to approve it.
Okay, would anyone like to comment on Mr. Neal's comments or make a comment all on their own? No, seeing none, I believe Mr. Evans, we're prepared for a vote.
And this is on a vote to deny. Mr. Eisenbacher.
Yes.
Mr. Neal.
Yes.
Mr. Kaltsunis.
No.
Mr. Sanzika.
No.
Mr. Clark.
Yes.
Mr. Desmond.
No.
So we had,
Only 3 yes votes.
so the motion fails.
Correct.
So we're back to the table with any action a board member would like to move at this point in time.
Chairman,
Mr. Sanzika.
I'd like to move that we approve the proposed ordinance, or variance. I believe that the statements of practical difficulty have been addressed, and that my major point is that this was originally platted at 7,200 feet. It wasn't changed by the previous owner or by the owners who presently owns it, but it was platted at 7,200 square feet, and it justifies the variance.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I second.
Mr. Desmond seconds. And now we are back to discussion on the motion. Is there any discussion by members? Mr. Vice Chairman Eisenbacher.
One more point. I was looking at the aerial view map, and it looks like the sidewalk ends right adjacent to this property. And if this property is developed, I believe that new sidewalks have to be put in as part of the property.
Right.
And the last meeting, I remember us discussing that it is not a corner lot because the adjacent is a driveway.
Right,
for
it's
the
not a
school.
corner lot.
So it would extend the sidewalk to the driveway, but not back to the school. Like the sidewalk would go in front of the 2 new houses.
I believe it would go parallel to Boyd, but I'm not sure we'll go any further than that.
Yeah, it would not extend back to the school.
Right.
But the school would have an opportunity to put a sidewalk on the property they have that is grass in the picture, obviously.
Oh, sure they could, sure.
And they would have, so the sidewalk would be extended to the driveway, the school's driveway.
It's the property line.
Yeah, so essentially
Yeah.
pavement.
And that ties into number 5, which is the, or, I'm sorry, not 5E, improving the safety in the area.
Okay, any other members liking to comment on the motion? Seeing none, I believe, Mr. Evans, we are prepared for a vote.
Mr. Neal,
No.
Mr. Kaltsunis,
Yes.
Mr. Sanzico,
Yes.
Mr. Clark,
No.
Mr. Desmond,
Yes.
Mr. Eisenbacher.
No.
So that motion fails as well, 3-3. So at this point in time, I think I would recommend to my colleagues on the board that if anyone would like to make a comment as to their opinion, trying to sway one more person to their side, that now is the time to do that. Otherwise, we can take no action on any, I should say, take no further action on this motion. We could table it till next month when we have a full board, one more member potentially being present. We don't know that for a fact, but it's really to the pleasure of the board. Is there anyone who would like to speak to this?
The thing that just keeps coming back to me is the alteration of the essential character of the area. As an investment property, the assumption is the only way to make this a viable investment is to put a sizable property that will recoup the cost that's already been put into it, and to add a considerably oversized property specific to this lot. If you pull out a little further, there might be more properties, but on this particular block, it will dramatically alter the characteristic of the neighborhood to have an oversized property amongst all of these 900 to 1,200 square foot houses. Congestion-wise, one additional house is not, in my opinion, going to contribute to congestion as much as the congestion, I assume, comes from the school and the lot, not from the property, the residence. That's the only thing that keeps coming back to my mind. I appreciate what the residents are concerned with, but I think, it's fairly obvious that construction is going to take place, and I would hate to have them not get what they're concerned with, and that they get a monstrous house in the middle of this subdivision when it's fairly clear that the initial intention seems to be that those were the plotted sizes for every single property on that street. And it might not currently be that way, but that's the one that keeps coming back. I think it would dramatically alter the intrinsic characteristic of this neighborhood to have a giant property there when everything else is on that street is not. And that's my position and why I'm voting for the variance.
Thank you, Mr. Desmond.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Neal?
I would only state that if I'm understanding, Mr. Desmond, your comments, is the part of your rationale for it is economic?
It's not economic so much as the character change. I mean, it will change the neighborhood. Now, the investor would, the assumption is that he'd be putting up a property that would not be in keeping with the area if he has to get his capital out from what he put in. That's not the economics of his situation that's the concern. It's the change in the character in the neighborhood that's the actual concern. But his economic requirement would most likely facilitate that character change. And it would, a large house would look incredibly out of place up and down that block.
I can understand that. I know that we can't take into account economic drivers in these decisions, but I'm also still left with the fact, and I'm prepared to say it, is that while there may have been no attempt to directly intimidate, or the word was used was threaten, individuals with, we can build 2 homes or I can build 1 big home. it still keeps coming up here in discussion that the hint is I build 2 homes or I build a 3,500 square foot monster. And the reality is, he could build something far different. He could build something that would fit within the zoning code, and it might be 1,800 square feet, it might be 2,000, it could be a lot of different things. Now, I don't know what the business model for that is, but I'm not swayed by the argument that we have to build 2 small or 1 large. And I'm partly of that opinion is because in the end, for the land use issues in the zoning, the code doesn't allow us to take into account any economic or business climate issues. So that's my opinion.
Thank you, Mr. Neal. I would just like to comment really on Mr. Desmond's comments. And everyone has a way of looking at this differently, but I would just kind of point out that item E is really related to the applicant's request for a variance. So does his proposal, which is the 2-house solution for his economic model and so forth, does that change the characteristics of the neighborhood? You can't look at the reverse, which is what does the existing ordinance allow, because that's not part of this. But, you know, I'm glad you brought it up because we've talked about that here a lot tonight, and it wasn't until after you were done that that kind of sank in with me. So I understand your general thrust, and if I lived on that street, I don't know that I'd want a house next to me that large, but it is allowed, and they knew that that was essentially a large lot which potentially could be redeveloped. If you see the house, just looking at it, you just have to scratch your head and say, wow, someone's potentially going to tear that puppy down and do something else with it. So the neighbors or anyone could have come to city council and perhaps asked for a change to the zoning ordinance. That's the recourse that citizens may have taken, which didn't, addressing or bringing more teeth into an ordinance to guarantee essentially homes very similar in size and stature and so forth. So I just feel, as a member, I'm not trying to say anyone is wrong. I'm just saying that we have to kind of not look at that piece. So I think the real question here is the applicant's proposal going to change the character aspect? Certainly not the size of the proposed homes. The double driveway with the pavement in between, I'll just say my personal preference is to never see driveways linked like that, because I've looked at a lot of homes previously in Troy trying to find a home to live in, and I considered a couple like that, and I just thought that that changed the characteristics of the neighborhood far more than if it's a 2-story home or a larger home. If everybody else has driveways kind of lined up just the same way, and then you slap something like that together, that does change things. Is it radical or horrendous? No. It does change things. I'll just leave it like that. So those are my general thoughts. I think that the way I'm looking at it is the literal interpretation of the zoning ordinance. The gentleman has a right to build that larger home without breaking any ordinance or variance or requesting any variance or setbacks, and that could be approved. And the law has been the law related to the ordinance for quite some time in Troy, although it is updated from time to time. So I kind of want to just address that piece. I'm a little conflicted on this. I think as everybody has been somewhat here tonight, but I see one option which complies with what council has acted on in the past. I think we certainly can't consider the traffic issue. I think Mr. Desmond and someone else mentioned that a one-house change, maybe Mr. Neal as well, said that isn't going to change the traffic situation. I think one of the neighbors mentioned taking away one more parking spot in a limited parking area. That is an issue, but once again, if we do approve the applicant's request, then that leads to one less potential parking spot. So I don't know, rejecting the request maintains that parking situation. So my general thoughts on a number of issues. Are there any other members who'd like to comment? Hearing none, we'll allow any member to address staff. Can you, Mr. Evans, can you just address the parking situation? I did, when the lady mentioned that the loss of one parking spot, I know that's not in the ordinance, but you want to address that? Would that driveway remove one or potentially two spots on the street? Are you aware? Without consulting the parking or
I'm not familiar with what
city
side.
engineer?
No.
Okay. Very good.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question
Mr.
for
Neal?
staff.
Yes.
This is for our city attorney. I don't know if this would happen in this case, and I hope it wouldn't, but I asked this question of you because it would fall into your domain. In the past 4 or 5 years that I've been on the board, I've tried to keep in mind previous determinations that we've made as a board, or previous determinations that were made by other boards of which we're knowledgeable about. And on this particular property, we seem to have some case history as far as board issues, as far as decisions. Because our decisions can be reviewed by the courts, you acting as our representative in those situations should something happen. And since I've been on the board, I think once or twice that has happened where somebody didn't like the decision and they've chosen it. For the city, what position are we in where we have, although a span of 11 years and no other changes to the property, where we have two different decisions for essentially the same thing? For the purposes of, if there's any guidance you can provide us, what kind of position is the city in when we have, two opposite decisions on the same issue? For you to defend our call, if we were to deny, for example.
If you were to deny, it would be the same, just make sure I understand the question. If you were to deny this request, it would be the same as the previous request. That was also a denial.
That's correct.
Right, so that would not be
Right.
a problem. Are you getting at an equal protection sort of issue?
yeah.
Right, well,
Is there some piece of information that we're not considering that you think in your professionalism we should hear?
no, what I'm most concerned with from the legal standpoint is that this board makes a decision based on the facts, and that it doesn't appear arbitrary or capricious, that there are reasonable reasons for whichever act you take. The city can defend, our office can defend either way, as long as you have established a record for making your decision. So that's why I'm here, is to make sure that there are facts and reasonableness within the record.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any members like to make a comment or a motion? Mr. Evans, if we are deadlocked, I've been on the board for a long time. I don't ever recall this being the situation. Either motions are approved or denied or postponed. So would it be reasonable for us to consider just tabling this motion until we have 7 members for next month's meeting?
Be the board's call.
Yeah. So that is an option to us here.
Yes.
We'll just take a stab at this one more time, and for purposes of trying to come to a conclusion, not that members have to make any changes in their previous decision on how they voted, but I'll make a motion to deny the applicant's variance request. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Neal seconds. And at this point in time, once again, we'll have any discussion if any board member would like to. I think I just recently spoke, so I'll refrain from speaking as an advocate of the motion. Are there any other members, either for or against, who'd like to address the motion? Mr. Sanzica?
I guess I'd like to ask, it would be appropriate to ask the applicant if he would like to postpone the,
That's one thing that you could do, sure.
I'd like to,
Okay, could you just speak to the, why don't you come forward and just address it in the microphone, so it's for the record? Because you are being videotaped.
I'd rather not. Let's get the vote over with and be done with it and move on.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thanks.
Anything else, Mr. Sanzica? Okay, thank you. Mr. Neal?
My only comment, and it really comes down to this, is that we didn't have adjoining property owners who made the effort to come here and say, I don't want this. And even with everything else I know about the procedural aspects of the zoning code, I think, and with everything that's been documented here, I could vote and be very happy with approving it, because it just seems to make reasonable sense. However, it does require a variance, and I have homeowners who don't want it, and I want to respect their view. And in the end, that's why I have a hard time moving off of denying it. That's just my opinion, but I just want to share it, and that's my final comment.
Thank you, Mr. Neal. Any other members? Mr. Sanzica?
in the same regard, I respect the neighbors' concerns, and I think I have to vote my conscience.
Sure.
And I have to vote for what I think is right and appropriate for this property owner that has two lots that by a situation where, some years ago, a property owner may have combined a lot for tax reasons, and it has hurt his opportunity to build two separate lots on this for that reason. So I understand where you're coming from, but I do have to vote my conscience, and I just can't agree with, I just can't approve, I can't agree with not approving this variance.
Thank you. Any other members like to make a comment? Yes,
Chairman?
Mr. Neal, sure.
Yeah, even though I said I didn't have another comment, I totally agree with what my fellow board member just said. The only difference is that for me, and it's a small minor issue, is that the property was bought in a combined setting. Two parcels were linked, two lots were linked, and you knew what you were getting into, or should have known, as far as doing your own due diligence when you bought the land. It's that minor point that pushes me to looking out more for the adjoining property owners, because I feel very much like what you just said about the property owner. I'd hate to step on his toes, but it's only that little factor, and that it's almost a coin flip, really. But that's what I'm basing my decision on. I know where you're coming from, sir.
Mr. Sanzica?
I just have one other final comment. And it really bothers me in that if if a neighboring home were to burn down, that they would be allowed to rebuild since the lot it would be a non-conforming lot. I understand that it was allowed in the ordinance to do that, but that lot physically is not any different than the lot that this gentleman owns. And the characteristics of it aren't any different, and why should he be treated any differently? That is my concern.
Thank you. Any other members wishing to speak? Seeing that there isn't anyone, Mr. Evans, I believe we're prepared for a vote.
Okay, and this is a vote to deny. Mr. Kaltsunis?
No.
Mr. Sanzica?
No.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Desmond?
Yes.
Mr. Eisenbacher?
No.
Mr. Neal?
Yes.
So I believe that's 4 yes votes, is that correct?
3 yes votes.
Sorry, I had
Yes.
that wrong.
3
My
yeses,
pen wasn't
3 noes.
working at that moment in time.
That's okay. Tie vote again.
Yes, so we are hopelessly deadlocked, I think, at this moment in time, and I think that we should consider tabling this for the next meeting. Is there someone who would like to make that motion?
Mr. Chairman, can we do that when the applicant has And you know Robert's rules better than I do, by far. But my question is, can we do that when the applicant has said he'd rather not?
The board can take action according to its wishes. He
Okay.
can, after, let's say hypothetically, it's approved to be postponed for next month, he can withdraw his application after speaking to Mr. Evans and the city staff, but not in this forum. Yes, Mr. Vice Chairman Eisenbacher.
The last comment about basically any house in this neighborhood could burn down and you'd have a right to build what he's asking for, I believe is a very good point. I'd like to make a motion to approve the request based on meeting A, because of the 7,200 square feet being typical of the neighborhood, being a reasonable request for variance. B, it is related to this property. C, it is not of a personal nature, it's related to the property. And E, it is not harmful to the essential character of the area.
There's a motion before the board. Is there a second?
Second.
It's probably been properly seconded.
Who seconded that?
Mr. Kaltsunis.
Thank you.
And now we have discussion on the motion.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question for staff.
Yes, Mr. Neal.
My question would be, it comes down to this, and it relates to originally the discussion, I think, the questions I had for you about a half hour ago, is if you take a lot, a single lot, and a home burns down, yes, they have the right to rebuild it. On this particular joint lot, if the house burned down, they have the right to rebuild it too. But it's really apples and oranges, because we have a much larger parcel because it's one parcel number, it's a joined piece of land. It's really not the same as comparing it to another single lot, which would be non-conforming. Those would be non-conforming, but they essentially have this clause. We have a clause in our zoning code that would allow a owner, an existing owner, as I understand it, to rebuild. But the parcel that is our subject property, which is a much larger parcel, it's double in size, it has to live within the confines of the zoning code, which requires 7,500 feet, unless they get a variance and they show a hardship. My opinion is that we have an apples and oranges item because of the joint parcels, and so it's not a good comparison. My question for you as our attorney is, am I missing the boat, or is that distinction relevant?
No, I think it's a relevant distinction. I mean, if on this piece of property that existing house burned down, the rebuild would have to be in conformance with the zoning ordinance. He could not, if the existing house burned down, he could not build two houses. He could only
Exactly.
build one.
Exactly, thank you. Mr. Chairman, I don't have any other comments.
Okay. So I would just comment that Mr. Neal's comment seems to strike at the heart of what Vice Chairman Eisenbacher just said. I'm not trying to say anything other than I find that the dialogue very interesting. I don't know how many ways you can slice down a piece of paper, but it seems like we've gotten there tonight in one capacity or another. So very in-depth. I don't know if everyone's here ever played a lawyer on TV, but I think you guys would all do a good job doing that. So having said that, I don't know if there are any other comments or questions of staff, but if not, we can proceed to a vote. Mr. Vice Chairman Eisenbacher, was there something? No. Okay. Mr. Evans, I think we can have a vote, please.
Okay, for a motion to grant, Mr. Sanzika.
Yes.
Mr. Clark.
No.
Mr. Desmond.
No.
Mr. Eisenbacher.
Yes.
Mr. Neal.
No.
Mr. Kaltsunis.
Yes.
Tie vote.
Well, we're hopelessly deadlocked at this point in time, and I think that we are looking perhaps to entertain a motion for a postponement. Or the board can choose not to do that, and this applicant's request is simply not approved. That's another way of looking at it. So we don't have to postpone, which is a good point, but I think someone made before. And I won't make that motion, so if no one else is going to make the motion,
In that case, does that mean he just starts the whole process over again?
he may.
Okay.
He may come back with a whole new variance request, which would be different than what we saw here today. And he could, and Mr. Evans, he could work with you on perhaps altering the request for the future.
Yeah, if it's a different request, he can come back to this board. It has to be
Yeah,
substantially
I'm saying
different.
even
Yeah.
if it's postponed on the current request, could he make an alteration? Or that's kind of in limbo because of the board's potential action on a postponement?
Well, if someone were to, if he were to come in and make a request that would somehow
Shane?
request more of a variance, we'd have to re-advertise anyways.
Okay, I see.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So it's essentially starting all over.
Right.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Neal?
if we went the route of taking no action, would we have the discretion to allow the applicant not to be hit with the application fee? Or are we hands tied?
Postponement, and Mr. Evans can address this. I believe the postponement, there's no further fee on his part. If this is not approved tonight, Mr. Evans, I believe that if he wants to file again, there's then a new process, which includes a fee.
Right, and just so everybody here is aware, and members of the public, that fee is designed to cover the true costs of creating the agenda, creating public hearing notices, mailing them out, everything that we do, including being here tonight and having this building open with everybody present, there's a true cost to. So the application cost does attempt to offset some of those costs.
So it's really obviously at the board's discretion to move forward or not. If there is a motion to be made, what I'll do as the presiding officer here is call for any motion. If hearing none, we'll proceed on with item number 5.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Neal.
I would make a motion to table it until, at what time Mr. Courtney would be present and that we could reconvene and have a full board.
Okay, before we have discussion, I just want to inquire of the city attorney, is that a proper motion where it's directed at the presence of one board member? I'll rule that out of order, Mr. Neal. But Mr. Frame, please.
Right, we wouldn't be specifically requesting Mr. Courtney to be here, but we would be tabling it for the possibility of having a full board at the next scheduled
date
meeting.
certain.
Right,
That was my intent.
I understand.
I understand.
So, Mr. Neal, would you like to make a motion?
Yeah, I'd like a motion that we would table this item until
April 21st.
April 21st, 2015, at which time we could have a full board review the matter.
Potentially have a full board?
Potentially, yeah.
Yes. Is there a second to that motion? I will second. And at this point in time, we have discussion on Mr. Neal's motion, or we can proceed to a vote. Is there any discussion or comments? Seeing none, Mr. Evans, please.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Desmond?
Yes.
Mr. Eisenbacher?
Yes.
Mr. Neal?
Yes.
Mr. Kaltsunis?
Yes.
Mr. Sanzik?
Yes.
Okay, that is approved for April's agenda, and we'll hopefully have all 7 members here. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for coming tonight on this important issue, and we'll see hopefully everyone back, if possible, next month. And I certainly want to thank the sergeant of our fine police department for being representing his area in this important issue. Thank you for your time. Item number 5 is communications. Mr. Evans, can I address that, please?
Sure.
I would like to just ask if you know off the top of your head, I believe we all received the city disclosure form of board members, and I know that I did not complete it yet. It got thrown in the stack of not being attended to right away. Do you know what the deadline is for us to have that back to the city clerk by?
I don't know.
Okay, I believe it's coming up. I believe it's by the April meeting, and if it's not April, it's certainly May.
I can
So,
find out and let you
yeah,
know.
Everyone, make sure that you dig through your pile like I have.
Somehow, April 15th, I know that's tax
Okay.
day, but April 15th is what's sticking in, April 12th, April 15th. You have time to turn it in.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any other communications, Mr. Evans? No. Okay. Item number 6 is miscellaneous business. Is there any business that we are to take up that I'm not aware of? None. And now, at this point in time, we have public comment to the board. If any member of the public would like to address items that weren't on the agenda, general comments to the board, please come forward and be recognized. I'll open this portion up now. And I'll call on anyone, please come forward. You can't from there. No, but can I come up and make a comment about sidewalks? Yes, you can. Yes, absolutely. Yes. But you'll have to identify yourself again, even though you already have done it. You don't have to sign in again, unless you want to.
Diana Lottie at 1308 Boyd. You noted that the sidewalks end at 1333, I guess that is. That's a curbed part of the street. Beginning with lot 1321, that's kind of the rural part of the street. There are no curbs there. So I don't know, I just wanted to let you know, if he has to put a sidewalk in there, it won't be a curbed area.
Okay.
So, and that's why that area is used for parking, because that's one small area that isn't included in the no parking because of schools. So it's just, but I just wanted to say that, okay? Half the street is rural and half of it is sidewalks, curbs, and the bottom apron there, so, okay.
Thank you very much. Any other person liking to address the board, wishing to address the board on item 7, public comment? Seeing none, we'll close this section out. And now we are adjourned. Everyone have a very good evening. Thank you for your participation.